Hey, stop staring! Haven't you guys ever seen a dragon before?
Hi SwitchUp family, and welcome back to the channel. A big thanks to Activision for providing this review copy. Remember, we'll be giving away 2 copies of Torchlight 2 to 2 lucky subscribers in the review that Glenn's working on, so make sure you're subscribed and that notifications are turned on. Originally releasing in 1998 and then 20 years later being remastered with the Reignited Trilogy. As far as technical achievements go, I think many questioned just how they were going to get the game to look and run as nicely as its 2018 counterpart on other consoles. Well, let's find out. In terms of the narratives then, the 3 Spyro stories are quite similar in some key areas, namely a big bad of some description comes along and causes trouble for the world that you're inhabiting. It's then up to you and some companions to go on an epic adventure that usually involves rescuing crystallized dragons,
Hey, Spyro!
returning lost dragon eggs, or gathering large quantities of treasure. And it's this simplistic charm which has carried over so nicely, evident that both teams worked closely together to create the same flavour, if you will, of the original trilogies, while updating everything about the visuals and re-recording the dialogue from some of those iconic scenes. In practice then, this means a game that's much easier to visually understand, as each character is so well animated and their facial expressions convey far more emotion and meaning to the player. A great way of showing this would be to look at the game using the original and the updated versions, and you really do get a better sense of the characters despite them still doing an excellent job in the original. For better and sometimes worse, the gameplay is almost identical to its original release back in 1998. Many of the levels in fact follow almost a one-for-one likeness to the original counterparts. However, the visual overhaul means that everything just runs so much more fluidly than it did before. Controlling Spyro is easy. The left stick can move him around, and with the press of a button he'll be charging around like a goat, using his horns to butt enemies out of the way, with his iconic flame breath accessible with the push of a button. Now, he isn't the most capable dragon in that he cannot fly all of the time, and let's be honest, it's a gameplay mechanic to stop you just flying everywhere, and it works just fine. The overarching gameplay remains quite similar between the 3 games. You essentially collect lots and lots of shiny things, rescue some form of creature, find a lost key, unlock a hidden chest, and then head to the exit. What I really enjoyed about the 3 games were how they introduced mini-games into the mix to keep things interesting, such as a Tony Hawk style skateboarding section, and even a rather simplistic but still fun ice hockey match. Where I found the game most excelled was when you'd completed a stage and then wanted to go off the beaten path and look for those extra hidden dragons or missing eggs. And it was here where I remembered why these games did so well back in the day. They were some of the first to really let the player explore a world while still allowing much of it to be optional, so that if you don't want to look for absolutely everything, you can just progress to the next area. Another big mechanic of the Spyro trilogy are what I like to call score gates. This might be a certain number of gems, a quantity of dragons, or a number of enemies that have to be dispatched before you'll be allowed to progress within a level. It's a simple mechanic, and it's one that shows the age of the game, but it still works well enough. However, after you've done this 3 or 4 times, it can become a little repetitive. It was nice to see that between the 3 titles, you will be learning entirely new skills at times. What makes this remaster stand out from some others we've seen are how many extra visual details they've included into the game. I'll cover these more when we get to the graphics section. They can actually make a difference to the gameplay. Each area you begin in has several different gates for you to travel to new worlds, which are essentially small levels. Once you've completed all the criteria within them, you can then return to this hub area. What I liked about the remaster is that they also include a quick travel system in the menus so that you can move from one world to the next instantly. without having to return to the hub. And they do something that I do not know why they don't have in every single game, and they make the load screens a little bit more interesting by allowing you to control Spyro and breathe flames. Yes, it's not going to reinvent the wheel, but it just takes away a little bit of that boredom and keeps that immersion and consistency rather than the majority of games just popping up a loading screen. The enemies have seen a remaster, with some requiring you to ram them with your charge attack, breaking the metal that they have upon them, and others you can beat with your flame. Interestingly, it seems to be the larger enemies that require the flame, and the smaller ones a touch more brute force. There are some trickier enemies thrown into the mix that you have to time just right, but overall they follow this very specific formula. And what you'll notice is that across the 3 games, you almost have reskinned versions of these same enemies that require the same method to dispatch. What I really love about Spyro, and particularly this remaster, is how the focus remains solely on having a fun time. You could be going for 5 minutes and thinking, okay, this is getting repetitive, and then a new element will be drip fed into the experience, whether it's allowing you to fly for short periods of time, taking part in the aforementioned minigames, or an unusual boss fight cropping up that requires you to think a little outside of the box. The game has an excellent flow about it. You'll be charging your way through levels, often feeling a little bit more like a Crash title, as you barely skip a beat, hopping from platform to platform, gliding long distances, and just making the ledge before char grilling some enemies. Now, I don't know about you, but I am one of those people that just can't leave a level until I've found every single last secret, and these are shown here within the pause menu. You'll also have this handy mini-map which is selectable, but it's not on by default, and it just shows you a general map of the area for finding some of those trickier hidden items. While it's not an overly difficult title, I did find myself caught off guard by the slightly unusual handling of the health. Now, your health is shown by the colour of your dragonfly, and as you kill critters, he'll eat them and then it will restore his health, indicated by the colour. When it's at gold, he's at full health, and then I believe blue, and green if you've got 1 hit left. It's important to listen to the dialogue mark when it's being told to you, because otherwise you'll die many times just not really realising how much health you had left. As it is, it's not a bad system. Perhaps it could have been mentioned more than just the once. It is a shame that if you're a physical collector, you'll have access to the first game and a few levels from 2 and 3, but the remaining levels will have to be downloaded as a separate patch. It's a practice which detracts from the value of those physical titles, and one which I know many people, including Glenn, are not going to enjoy at all. It becomes a particularly evident problem when a developer like CD Projekt Red come out and release the full Witcher 3 experience on a single cartridge and know full well they're still going to make enough money. That being said, Activision have clearly put the time, love and care into bringing this version to the Nintendo Switch in all its glory, and it plays wonderfully. For me, gameplay scores 17 out of 20. It was really good that they included many quality of life improvements to the controls, such as putting the flame move onto one of the trigger buttons, and my only real gripe with the controls are the slightly strange implementation of the run mechanic, whereby when you press the run button, it's the direction your head is facing on screen rather than the direction you're holding on the left stick that you begin to run, and it was just a minor gripe, but it became a tiny issue. Other than that, the rest of the controls are really tight, and they score 18 out of 20. This will be the one area that many of you will have been waiting for, because we've seen many ports on the Nintendo Switch using this same engine, which is the Unreal 4 engine, not perform quite up to par. If you remember the very early title, Snake Pass, it was an excellent game, but it was also a very blurry one. And now with the Spyro Reignited Trilogy, you're looking at some very difficult lighting and shadow effects that could potentially bring the Switch to its knees. Well, they don't. The Switch runs Spyro almost flawlessly. In docked mode, everything looks very good indeed. I'm unsure as to the resolution that they've opted for. It doesn't to my eye look like native, perhaps 900 or 720p with some good anti-aliasing, but it's running smoothly. Not 60 frames per second by any means, they look to be quite consistently targeting 30 frames per second. But what I will say is that even side by side with the PS4 version of the game, they've done a fantastic job of bringing it over to the Nintendo Switch in all its glory. As I mentioned, there are some difficult lighting effects, and the shadows throughout look crisp and clear, and all of the animations have transferred over excellently. Blasting through containers and breaking up pots, large quantities of particles will fill the screen, and the majority of the dynamic lighting is still intact. The world design and refresh works well here, with every environment feeling fresh and new, and when combined with the tight controls and smooth visuals, they really are onto a winner here. And then we get into the handheld mode, and it's still quite good. As you can see from the on-screen visuals, Handheld has a slightly lower resolution of course, but other than that, would you really know you were playing this in handheld? You can change the amount of motion blur to suit your tastes, and if you look closely within cutscenes, it does look more like they've used perhaps the PS4 cutscenes and just rendered them as a video like we saw with a game like Hellblade, but other than that, it's all just so good. Now, it's not entirely perfect, and I did notice a few frame drops here and there when things got hectic on the screen. Having said that, for the most part, this is an outstanding port, and I am so impressed with what they've managed to achieve. Visuals score 18 out of 20. In terms of the audio, they've done a brilliant job of trying to bring back that original flavour. Now, although we don't have a reprisal of the original Spyro, Carlos Alazraqui, probably murdered that name, I'm so sorry, what we do get is Tom Kenny from the second and third titles reprising the role and re-recording the character Spyro for all three titles, as well as the original musical composer of the Spyro trilogy, Stuart Copeland, creating an entirely new musical theme for the game. They then took all of the original theme music and remastered those as well. It really must have been a truly painstaking task to get the game looking, sounding and running the way that it is, but it has paid off magnificently. Audio scores 19 out of 20. The Spyro games aren't the longest titles individually, but as a package, you're getting around about 17 to 30 hours of playtime, depending on whether you like to speed through or if you're more of a completionist. The games will cost you £34.99, €39.99 or $39.99 and can be had as both a physical release or a digital download. The physical release loses a touch of its luster when you consider the large 8GB edition, but still I believe these to be excellent value for money on the whole. Throw in the fact that already you can find the game for around about 10 or 15% cheaper if you're buying it physically, and the sheer amount of work that's gone into making this, and you're not going to be disappointed spending that amount of money. It's also currently exactly the same price on the PlayStation 4 store, but I'm sure you could again find it cheaper physically over there. If I had never played the series and I were to choose between the two, it's one of those titles that just works so brilliantly in handheld, and if you're considering buying the new Switch Lite, I can imagine this being a match made in heaven. Overall for me, I give value 17 out of 20. While in many ways the Spyro trilogy now shows its age in a gameplay sense, that's not always a negative. In fact, the freedom it allows the player to go off the beaten track and explore for those hidden crystals, and the strange and quirky mini-games that it throws in, combined with some unique boss fights and a visual style that is just sublime, really made this a game I enjoyed reviewing. It scores an overall SwitchUp score of 89%. A brilliant game and an excellent port on the Nintendo Switch, and one which gives me high hopes of playing The Witcher 3 very soon indeed. Right, I'm off to try and play some of this Astral Chain game I'm hearing so much about but aren't able to play because I'm always reviewing things. Thanks so much to all of you guys for supporting us. Make sure that you join the channel if you're interested in the Torchlight 2 review we have coming up and the giveaway for that one. And a huge thank you to our patrons who support the channel each and every month. For all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!